rate and what you really should know as a developer if you're modeling storage in this utility territory. So just a high level of this, in March of 2021, PG&E finished mandatory transitioning all CNI customers to their new quote unquote B rates, which featured that 4 to 9 p.m. on-peak period. So within this new suite of rates was the new option S, daily demand charge rate, which was really just designed to be a storage-friendly rate option for B19 and 20 rates. We have been posting content on this. We have 2 blogs on this that you might have seen, but we wanted to host a webinar that's going to provide a little bit more clarity for everybody. So some housekeeping items to go over quickly. We are going to be recording this webinar, and after the webinar, we are going to be sending an email to all registrants with the video and the slide deck. Q&A on our webinars is always at the end, but you can chat your questions into the chat box throughout the webinar, and we will try to get to as many as we can at the end. We have 3 awesome speakers from the Energy Toolbase team on with us. Erin Christensen, she is our technical content specialist and a rate expert, utility rates expert, and she's been the author on a lot of these Option S and a lot of our technical content recently. So if you haven't checked out our work, please do. Matt Simo, he is our regional manager at Energy Toolbase, and we have Adam Gurza, the VP of Business Development. First things first, I'm going to pass it over to Erin to kick us off.
Thank you, Tracy. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to dive into PG&E's storage-friendly Option S rate with you. The goal of today's webinar is to increase industry knowledge of the structure and availability of Option S, along with highlighting the utility bill savings that can be achieved. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and jump right in. Like Tracy mentioned, we recently published a 2-part blog series centered around Option S. Within the first blog, we touched on how PG&E is the first utility in the state of California, and to the best of our knowledge, the first utility in the country to release an energy storage friendly rate that features daily demand charges. Our data team has seen the $ per kW per day charge type in the form of capacity charges assessed by third-party suppliers such as Direct Energy and Constellation. In California, customers receiving supply from a third party are referred to as direct access customers. We've also seen daily demand charges present in other countries such as Canada and Australia, but PG&E seems to be the first electric distribution utility in the US to implement this demand charge type. Option S is a result of PG&E's historic 2017 to 2019 general rate case. This is the rate case that contained the notable shift in the on-peak time of use period from noon to 6 p.m. to 4 to 9 p.m., something all 3 of the major IOUs in California implemented as part of the statewide effort to promote more efficient and cleaner energy use. For PG&E, this change came in the form of a new suite of commercial and industrial rates referred to as B rates. Although the rates were approved by the CPUC in August of 2018, they were not implemented until November 2019. During this time, the B rates were mandatory for new PG&E customers, but voluntary to existing. It wasn't until March of this year that the B rates became mandatory for all commercial and industrial PG&E customers, with the exception of those qualified for time of use grandfathering. These customers are protected from the B rates for a period of 10 years from their PTO issuance or 2027, whichever comes first. In 2028, all legacy rate tariffs with PG&E, such as A10 and E19, will be closed, and all commercial and industrial customers will be serviced under one of the B rate options. Time of use grandfathering is separate than net energy metering or NEM grandfathering, which we are aware is a very hot topic in California right now with the NEM 3 decision right around the corner. We recently published a blog on the NEM 3 topic, and we'll be hosting a webinar later this month. The storage-friendly rate alternative Option S is only offered under rates B19 and B20. With that said, any customers interested in Option S but still receiving service under one of PG&E's legacy rates will need to opt onto B19 or B20, forfeiting their time of use grandfathering rights. The B19 rate is available on a voluntary basis to customers with a maximum billing demand of less than 500 kW and mandatory to those with a maximum demand of more than 500 but less than 1,000 kW. Customers exceeding 1,000 kW for at least 3 consecutive months will be placed under the B20 rate. To elect service under option S, there is really only one eligibility requirement that must be met. A customer must have an energy storage system with a rated capacity in watts that is at least 10% of the customer's peak demand over the previous 12 months. PG&E does require a minimum of 30 days of usage history to evaluate whether the battery capacity is at least 10% of the customer's peak demand. This means that qualifying customers starting a new service agreement at a new location will not be immediately placed under option S. The chart on this next slide and the ones to follow, in addition to the case studies that Adam will be going over, are all centered around the B19 rate with a secondary voltage type, since the largest chunk of commercial industrial customers fall under this service classification. The juicy part of the rate design of option S lies within the energy and demand charges, but I wanted to quickly mention the customer charge, since it is the only rate aspect that differs based on whether a customer is deemed voluntary or mandatory. Like mentioned on the previous slide, voluntary B19 customers are those with max demands of less than 500. These customers are assessed a reduced customer charge, roughly 20% of the customer charge assessed to mandatory customers. For context, the customer charge assessed to the voluntary B19 customers is the same as the one assessed under the B10 rate. Now, when looking at the energy charges of option S, you'll notice that they mirror those of the well-known solar-friendly option R rate. For both solar and storage projects, the wide differentials among time of use periods offers a strong price signal for time of use arbitrage opportunities, especially during the summer season with a peak versus off-peak differential of almost 25 cents per kilowatt hour. The most innovative aspect of the option S rate structure is the introduction of the $ per kW per day demand charge type. The Solar Energy Industries Association, more commonly known as SEIA, lobbied tirelessly during PG&E's rate case for the creation of a storage-friendly rate that contained daily demand charges. SEIA argued that daily coincident demand charges further enable energy storage systems to capture value by discharging during times that would help reduce grid demand and produce ratepayer benefits by avoiding marginal utility costs. I believe SEIA can also be credited when it comes to the option S rate name too. Earlier this year, our engineering team pushed an extensive software update to our Etb developer platform. We refer to the update as V4. Within the array of streamlined functionalities and increased capabilities, users can now easily model rates that contain daily demand charges. Option S incorporates several types of demand charges, increasing the complexity of understanding and modeling this rate. On this slide, you'll see a side-by-side comparison of the demand charges included within the standard B19 rate, the option R version, and option S. The B19 standard rate and option R version feature monthly on-peak and part-peak time of use demand charges. This is in addition to a monthly max non-coincident demand charge. Meanwhile, option S assesses daily on-peak and part-peak demand charges in addition to a max demand charge that is assessed monthly and applied to all hours outside of 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Like the other options, the standard and option R, option S also includes a monthly max non-coincident demand charge. Just yesterday, we published the second part of our Option S blog series, which focuses on the increase in savings Option S can provide solar plus storage projects, much of which Adam will be taking a closer look at here shortly. The blog features several pie charts, including the one on this slide and the two on the slide to follow. We wanted to put into perspective just how much of the total demand charge allocation is comprised of daily demand charges. Just for a little context, to do so, we converted each daily demand charge to a monthly demand charge by multiplying the $ per kW per day charge by 30.4 days. So for example, the summer peak demand charge of 60 cents per kilowatt per day was converted to an $18.24 monthly charge. We then annualize the charges by multiplying each demand charge by the number of months in the season it's assessed. Finally, we added together the totals for each respective charge type and calculated the percentages featured on this slide. It was surprising to see that the daily demand charges only amounted to 41% of the total demand charge allocation, which, while traditional demand charges made up the remaining 59%. We commend PG&E for starting what we hope will quickly turn into a daily demand charge rate trend, not just in California, but countrywide. Option S is definitely a step in the right direction when it comes to creating electric rates that are optimal for energy storage, but we feel that further rate structure innovation is needed to bolster ESS deployment and optimize electric bill savings. We'd like to see even more of a shift of demand charge revenue be collected through daily demand charges versus monthly. Like PG&E proclaims on their website, when demand charges are assessed monthly, a period of elevated load within the month sets the applicable demand charges for the entire billing period. But when demand charges are assessed daily, customers have the ability to approach peak demand shaving on a more granular level day to day. It'll be interesting to see if a shift in these percentages will be included within PG&E's next general rate case. The pie charts on this slide are quite eye-opening. Here we looked at the allocation of demand charges between non-coincident and time of use based when comparing option R to option S. As you can see, the shift from R to S is pretty significant, with time-related demand charges making up just 5% of the total demand charges assessed under option R. The distribution of demand charge types has a direct correlation with how effectively solar plus storage customers can reduce their bill. Adam will be going over this concept here shortly when presenting the savings simulations we ran on 10 different real-world load profile types. Before handing things over to Adam, I wanted to quickly touch on the Option S reservation system that launched just over 2 weeks ago. As many of you already know, Option S has a capacity allotment of 150 megawatts with 50 megawatt caps for each rate category: B19 voluntary, B19 mandatory, and B20. Representatives within the solar and storage industry, primarily CALSA and SEIA, began advocating back in October 2019, a month before the new suite of B rates were implemented, for the ability to reserve Option S capacity prior to PTO issuance. It wasn't until April of this year that PG&E submitted an advice letter requesting approval of the pre-PTO reservation system that is now in place. The number of megawatts currently enrolled and reserved can be viewed via the PG&E Option S enrollment tracker page. PG&E has shared with us that we can expect this page to be updated once a month. The most recent update took place on August 25th, the day after the reservation system went live. This next slide lists the information customers will need to provide in order to reserve Option S capacity. Once the reservation request email has been sent to options@pgne.com, a response can be expected within 5 business days. If the initial request is verified to be complete, eligibility will be checked and an acceptance notification will be provided within 10 business days. Reserve capacity will be held for 18 months. If the project does not reach PTO within 18 months, 2 6-month extensions can be requested via email prior to the end of the initial 18-month reservation period. The table on this next slide was taken from the PG&E advice letter I just referenced. As you can see, there are roughly 285 customers with existing storage interconnections already eligible for Option S. What this table doesn't include are customers currently serviced under rate B10 that are eligible to receive service under the voluntary B19 rate. For these specific customers, the results may not be as cut and dry. There are more moving pieces with vastly different rate structures at play. Within our study, we focused primarily on B19 mandatory, which again is customers with demands greater than 500 kW but less than 1,000. According to this table, about 2/3 of the eligible Option S customers in the PG&E territory fall into that bucket. With that said, I will pass the mic to Adam, who will be diving into the real world case studies we looked at within our study.
Great, thank you, Erin. Awesome job as always. Let me get my screen up and I'm gonna get going here. Yeah, so Erin mentioned that she recently authored 2 blogs on the topic, a lot of the same content she just summarized there, but has just been doing a ton of research on Option S over the last month. So definitely be sure to check those out if you haven't already. And we will also make, for our users, make Erin available for calls and follow-up questions on all this. Okay, so on my section of the presentation here, I'm really going to attempt to answer the question of the title of this webinar, which is, how advantageous are these Option S rates for solar and storage projects? And we've been getting that exact question a lot over, I'd say probably going back at least a year. And we've certainly been thinking about it ourselves and wanted to do kind of more of a systematic study to really, hopefully, get to the root of that question. And the way that we thought to approach this, and really the best way to answer the question, is to do so comparatively, meaning, how does the Option S rate compare against the default rate, for example, B19, and then obviously also the Option R rate, the solar-friendly rate. Is it better? Is it the same? Is it worse? And that's really when I walk through some of the results and how we organize this, how we attempted to answer that question. So Erin just hit on this. This slide here is just showing the 3 different, I guess, categories or rates that could opt onto that B19 Option S rate. Anything over 75 kW of demand is eligible. For our study here, we really focused on the B19 mandatory. So those are folks with demand over 500 kW, less than 1,000 kW, and that's that max annual customer demand. I will note, so all of the results we're looking at is really for that category, but I will say if you just look at the B19 mandatory, the middle there, and then the B20 on bottom, the large, it's pretty much identical. Really the only major change there is there's higher monthly fixed charges. So I think all of the conclusions that we've drawn are you can really apply this to B19 mandatory or B20 customers. Okay, so without further ado, that's right, I have one more slide that just talks a little bit about the different load profiles. Erin actually mentioned this already. The idea here was to just get a good cross-section of customer load profiles with different load factors. Some folks might actually remember this slide because I'm using the same slide from the masterclass analysis we published back in February. That was a broader analysis that looked at C&I rate tariffs all over the state in each of the 3 IOU territories. And we used these same load profiles. Again, all real world data. And the idea here was to try to get a good representative, cross section of different types of sites that folks are out there modeling. The church being the lowest load factor, that is the highest volatility profile, the data center being highest load factor or lowest volatility load profile of the bunch. Okay, so without any more, let me jump right into my runs. I want to take you through a couple of the runs I performed and exactly how we set up and ran these, and then we will circle back and look at the summary results slide. So modeling Option S is really quite straightforward. Again, actually that's on this tab here. It's simply doing what you normally do when you're setting up rate switches. In this case, moving a customer from the default B19 rate, and that Option S rate is now listed right alongside the other options like the Option R. And we've also got the both voluntary under 500 kW demand and mandatory. So let's see here. I kind of wanted to just give a little bit of context. I actually was able to regurgitate and kind of reference back to some of that masterclass analysis where we actually studied the B19 versus the B19 option R. If you remember, we went really deep in that analysis, analyzing the effect of rate switches and really attempting to answer the question, hey, for a solar plus storage customer, are they better off switching from the default rate to the option R rate in that case? And just to kind of re-summarize what those results really conclusively showed, the answer was on the B19 option R switch, the answer was every single time, for every single case that we ran, yes, in fact, the customer would be best off moving to option R. In other words, they would be capturing the most total dollar savings. This number here, which is really the one we were honing in on. So that's an important data point to know. Again, just to restate that, B19 option R was the customers were always better off. Solar plus storage customers were always better off compared to the B19. So really, this analysis here becomes, okay, is the customer better off on the B19 option R or moving to the B19 option S? It turns out, Erin just hit on this actually in some of her comments. It turns out in a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities between the R and the S rate. The energy charges, the dollar per kilowatt hour energy charges side of the ledger is actually identical. So S is exactly the same as R. So let's just kind of jump in and look at a sim on the R to begin with. I just kind of want to point out some of those similarities. Maybe let me jump into a summer month. That's where those time of use deltas get wider, as folks well know. Maybe just zooming into kind of a week period early in the month. This is an office building load profile, by the way. And again, this is the B19R, and you can just see down there, this is the one where there's a very strong time of use arbitrage price signal in the 4 to 9 window. You can see where my mouse is down there. It's a 36.5 cent on peak rate. So we're got a pretty strong price signal to definitely go out and do arbitrage, discharge as much of the battery as we can in that 4 to 9 window. You'll notice here we're actually a little bit constrained just because we simply don't have a lot of load in the 4 to 9. We chose to limit. We are not exporting to grid. But this was a combination of peak shaving with arbitrage, and the arbitrage signal happens to be a pretty good opportunity. So that's really when we're looking at one specific, again, option R simulation, effectively what's happening. We are stacking, we're doing peak shaving, and we're also doing some arbitrage and discharging the 4 to 9 window. Okay, let's switch over to option S, and it actually in a lot of ways looks very, very similar. Again, all of the same identical setup and assumptions that we use throughout. So we're really just trying to isolate the impact of, okay, are we better off on S or are we better off on R? And again, the one metric that we really zeroed in on was total electric bill savings, total savings from both solar and storage. Actually, just as a point of comparison there, on the office building run, you can see we are better off on the S. We were saving about $306,000 annually. On the R, we're up to about 331 on the S. It turns out on the simulation itself, let's actually just go back to that same billing cycle. It's really going to look pretty similar. It was quite interesting. I was actually even doing comparisons, just kind of checking how many annual cycles are we running when we're moving the customer to S, forcing the customer to S, or forcing the customer to R, and they were actually coming in quite similar. So I guess that's another way of saying I really think that the simulation itself actually runs pretty similarly in terms of when we're charging and when we're discharging. It just so happens that on the S rate, and it's kind of hard to see here visually because of that dollar per kW day. And again, like Aaron was saying, it kind of takes some getting used to thinking in terms of like 60 cents dollar per kW day demand charges. And as Aaron mentioned, it's not the only demand charge. There's also a non-coincident demand charge, and there is also another small demand charge outside the hours of 2 to 9. So bottom line, the simulation actually runs pretty similarly. we're still doing arbitrage out in that 4 to 9 window. We're actually still capturing a fair amount of energy savings from the storage system. It just so happens we're actually kind of also just happening to get some good and some more richer demand charge savings. Because again, remember, the dollar per kW day demand charge from the option S rate, it's in the 4 to 9 window. It is an on-peak demand charge. Okay, it is definitely not a non-coincident demand charge. So really, a lot of the money gets made out in that 4 to 9 window, both on the energy side and the demand side. I hope that was kind of made a little bit of sense. Let me pivot back to kind of my results slide, and I'm just going to kind of summarize some other conclusions. So across the 10 different load profiles, again, all real world data, in our case, 8 of the 10 runs, option S came out better. And that's the gray line. And again, it really just makes sense at this point to compare option S versus option R, because R always beat the default rate and S always beats the default rate. The increase in total savings is not huge. On average across the 10 runs, we're talking about 4 or 5%. True to the option S, quote unquote, solar friendly. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The storage friendly, rate. That's what S stands for. It is in fact a better rate when measuring just the storage ESS savings. On average, there we saw about an 18% increase. Definitely with some variance depending on the load profile. So I guess the general conclusion there is certainly, in the vast majority of cases, 8 of 10 runs, we were better moving the customer to S. So let me just kind of talk very briefly about those outlier cases, right? So what about those 2 times when it wasn't better? This was interesting, and Aaron and I kind of got to do some late night digging into this together to really understand and interpret this. And I think we have a really succinct, I hope, explanation for why. And it's really a combination of the shape of the customer's load profile, and then also, boy, I'm jumping all around here, jumping back to this slide that Aaron hit on, which I got to tell you, when I look at it in graphical form here, it's really pretty crazy to see how significant a shift happens between R and S. Option R, the quote unquote solar friendly rate option, it is pretty much all non-coincident demand recovery. In other words, whatever your peak max demand is for the month, it doesn't matter time of day, that's where those demand charges are occurring. On the option S, this is certainly one of the most significant changes or points compared to the R. 70% almost of the recovery moves to the TOU, more or less the 4 to 9 window, because again, the dollar per kW day is in the 4 to 9 window. So explaining again why we have these outlier cases, it's a combination, the shape of the customer's load, and that right there. So let me attempt to show you and explain why. Again, I'm trying to say what cases does it not make sense to move to S? I'm going to show you the supermarket, and this was an interesting one. So this is real supermarket data. Just kind of zooming in on a week, you can see kind of a bell curve, kind of a wider shoulder. This customer starts to ramp at 6 or 7 in the morning. Is definitely peaking midday or late afternoon, and then shouldering out to 7:30 or 8. But what's happening here is solar actually does a pretty decent job at reducing non-coincident demand. Here's actually a good illustration of it right there. The before. Before solar, before storage, customer had a max monthly demand in this billing cycle, about 647 kW. Post solar, post storage, that's getting knocked all the way down to about 420. Okay, so what's happening is solar and the bell curve of a south-facing solar system happens to overlay pretty nicely against this customer's max demands. So effectively, solar does a pretty decent job on this particular load profile of reducing non-coincident demand charges. And again, remember, effectively, when we move this customer to option S, or we propose moving them to option S, that goes away. Remember, on option R, 95% of demand charges are non-coincident, which happen for this customer to be middle of the day. And solar is reducing those somewhat efficiently. Moving them to option S, a lot of that demand charge recovery shifts out to 4 to 9. And effectively, we're just losing that benefit, I guess is the way to say it. So if I was to say it in one sentence, what's happening is the customer on option R that has a lot of midday load and it happens to be peaking midday, you know, they're on option R, they're just able to reduce demand charges, and solar has a higher savings. And now on option S, if you were just to look at and isolate the energy storage savings, yes, for this customer, option S would be better. But in its entirety, which is really the way we're looking at this whole analysis, the total solar plus storage savings, you're actually just kind of losing out on more solar savings than you're gaining on storage savings. That's kind of a mouthful. I hope that makes some sense. I guess the flip side of the equation, I'll just spend 1 minute here because it's certainly interesting to think about, I thought. Okay, well, what cases is what load profiles rather are, when you're moving to option S, are you getting like way more savings? When is option S like way better than option R? And it's kind of the flip of what I just said there. For this run here, I believe the church was the load profile where I believe it was 15% more total savings moving on to option S versus option R. And it has, again, it's kind of the exact flip of what I just said there. Let me see if I can illustrate it here. Whereas the supermarket has all that midday load, the church is, there you go, peaking at 8:30 in the morning. And when you're overlaying solar on top of it, and again, of course, you're doing this across a whole billing cycle, solar's really not doing anything in terms of reducing that kW max demand. All of the lifting gets done by storage. So to summarize, the cases where S is like significantly better than R, I would say are cases where the customer is peaking outside of kind of like, you know, the midday underneath the bell curve of solar. And you can certainly just think in your head like different types of load profiles where that's true, whether it's a late evening peak, you know, or an early morning peak in this case. We think those cases actually, not only are you better off going to option S, you're probably significantly better off going to S is the way to best summarize that. Okay, so yeah, on average, again, I actually think I already hit on all those points. I have one slide left before passing it off to Mr. Simo. I just kind of summarized a few of my key takeaways from the runs we performed. This is an interesting one. This is a super important one. And this was actually one of the biggest takeaways from the masterclass analysis we did back in February. This is very true on the B19 rate. This is actually, it happens to be true, frankly, statewide in all of the IOU territories on all of the commercial rate tariffs. And that is, when you're looking at total solar plus storage savings, PV really does get the lion's share of the savings. You know, specific to option R, we're talking like 80-20 in terms of like, if you were to break out where those total savings are coming from, you know, most of them are coming from solar. Moving to option S, you get a small incremental uptick in the amount of storage savings. But again, in its entirety, most of it comes from solar. So, you know, you just kind of have to have your brain think, because it's kind of ironic. You know, we're talking about the storage friendly option S rate, but it turns out how friendly it is for solar, it turns out is actually even more important. Let's see, on average, again, option S savings were better than option R. This was the average across all runs. It was interesting, even for solar, S was slightly better. And then for storage, it was significantly better, 18 to 20% better, again, averaged, kind of what we would expect to see there. This is an interesting one. This is another way I sliced up the data in the master class. I'm always curious to just think about like, okay, well, let's just look at the storage savings. Where are those savings coming from? Are those dollar per kilowatt hour energy savings, or are those dollar per kW demand savings? And you can see certainly more of the energy storage savings on option S are demand charge based, which makes sense. Again, kind of goes to the point earlier, we're more efficiently reducing capturing savings with storage on that option S, storage friendly option S rate. Okay, so I guess this is the big takeaway. I am, we're always pretty careful over here to make big generalizations about like it's always this way. But I think I'm comfortable saying, and by the way, we might get into this in Q&A just in terms of like system sizing, solar relative to storage. I did run some other runs just to kind of check how much effect that would have. And I'm pretty comfortable saying that I believe in the majority of cases, the customer would be best off moving to option S. In other words, they would get more utility bill savings than they would by staying on option R, and certainly a lot more than staying on the default B19 rate in this case. And my last one is, and this is a good segue to Mr. Simo coming up next, there are outlier cases for sure. One thing we didn't talk about, maybe we can get into it more in the Q&A, on the B10 to B19 voluntary switch, it was not as cut and dry, I think, as it is on the B19 mandatory. So all of this is to say it's not always, and definitely check and consult with your account manager to put a second set of eyes on your runs when you're looking at that. And with that, Tracy, I am going to pass it over back to you and back to Mr. Simo.
All right. Thank you so much, Adam. And man, wow, great job on the research. I know that it takes a long time to go through things like that on the platform. So my part here, I'm going to be briefly moving through some key aspects of our product suite, starting with our modeling platform, ETB Developer. And really from project conception through the project end of life, our team and our holistic approach takes you through each step of your project's lifestyle. Starting with the developmental phase, pre-installation with ETB Developer, to post-install by controlling the assets in the field with our Acumen EMS, and finally monitoring the performance of those assets with ETB Monitor. So next slide, please. All right, so starting off with ETB Developer. So this is really what we consider to be the gold standard, and a lot of our clients agree. We pride ourselves in our accuracy and our transparency of our avoided cost analysis in the PV and storage sectors. We operate in all 50 states and 32 countries, which goes to show the flexibility of Energy Toolbase to accommodate different scopes of work and markets. So not only does ETB Developer specialize in modeling current market trends, but also future changes such as NEM 3.0 that Adam had just kind of briefly touched on. So based on the information available thus far, it's looking like the upcoming NEM 3 will be moving towards a fixed value about 5 cents per kilowatt hour exported to grid, which poses a challenge to standalone PV to pencil out financially due to that drop in export value as opposed to the current NEM 2.0. So eating those exports with available battery capacity can help restore some of that lost value. We can easily and accurately represent this in ETB Developer. So we help guide our users with entering in monthly bills or interval data, entering in rate tariffs as we've just seen today, and we currently sit at 82,000 rates in our database, and we're ever growing that database based on customer requests and new rates that are coming out within different markets we work in, building out PV and storage systems, customizing financial models, and finally bringing it all together in a presentable and comprehensible format to the end user. Our new ETB version 4 is going to allow you guys to create a proposal in just mere minutes as well. So it's a nice step up from B3. It's very streamlined. It's very intuitive. So if you haven't seen that yet, please jump in, start a free trial, and check it out. We do have dedicated account managers that'll help you learn the platform and assist in the development of the most accurate proposals for each unique opportunity brought to us. And you can access that person by their calendar links, emails, or their direct office lines. Next slide, please. So moving on to our ETB Acumen Energy Management System. So this takes in numerous factors into consideration when creating a battery charge and discharge strategy. And one of the driving forces behind this, working right within ETB developer as well, we look at the consumption profile that you enter in, how the customer pulls in energy and demand from the utility, right? We look at the specific rates being considered and the most valuable aspects of those rates, which Adam did a phenomenal job touching on, right? We want to look back at those rate tariffs and identify what pieces of that rate can we exploit to get our client the most savings possible. We want to know, is there PV or not in this opportunity, and how would it affect the consumed energy? We want to know the hardware characteristics of the proposed storage system. So Acumen takes all that consideration in order to create that unique battery charge and discharge strategy. We also use real-time data to feed into the AI aspect of our Acumen controls to continually be more efficient the longer the system operates in the field. We are hardware agnostic, so we apply Acumen to any hardware vendor and size variation. We operate with behind-the-meter strategies as well as within incentive program compliance. So certain incentives out there, right? The Hawaii EDRP, the Emergency Demand Response Program, the right SGIP out there in California. So our Acumen controls will make sure that we comply with the requirements of those incentive protocol. We have a wealth of knowledge here at Energy Toolbase. We can help with almost any situation brought our way. So definitely just reach out to us. Let us know if you have any questions at all. We'll make sure you talk to the right person. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking into our hardware partners. So those of you that have explored Energy Toolbase, you'll see that we have a nice suite of integrations that you can choose from. We also have what we call the ETB portal. Now, the comparison between those two, our ETB portal is very flexible and dynamic in that it can allow you to model any energy storage system in the world that you want to model. All we need is those hardware characteristics and your control assumptions of how those batteries should be operating. But the value that comes into the integrations is that we do all that heavy lifting for you. We work with some of the largest vendors available when it comes to battery storage, and we're continually increasing the offerings in our energy storage product suite. So guys, just keep your eyes open for new integrations to kind of go live and kind of filling in some gaps and some different sizes that accommodate different size opportunities all over the world. But naturally, one size does not fit all when it comes to choosing the correct battery storage option. So that ties into our account management staff, right? We are very well versed in helping determine which battery is most appropriate for the opportunity being presented to us. So when a battery purchase is made using our Acumen controls, we want to make it as simple as possible with a single PO process, as well as engineering, installation, and commissioning support with our customer success department. Next slide, please. And then finally, right, once this installs, right, it gets in the ground, it's operational, we want to know, and more importantly, the contractor and clients want to know, well, what's going on site? So we have our ETB Monitor, okay? So our robust monitoring software provides a real-time insight into the operational performance and savings of your PV and battery asset in the field. It allows users to view an individual site as a standalone system or many sites together as a fleet view. ETB Monitor operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're going to deliver alerts, status updates, as well as notifications that are configurable to the preference of the user. And ETB Monitor will also deliver real-time data with intuitive charts, interactive graphs, including a post-analysis achieved savings, as well as the ability to export any collected data. So that post-analysis achieved savings is especially important, right? Hey, we projected it to save XY, number of dollars. Here's what we actually achieved, and just being able to track and monitor what is actually happening in the field. So if any current users listening have any questions regarding any of our offerings, please reach out to your dedicated account manager, and anyone who is not a current user, please reach out to me directly by email, which we're going to share when we finish up. And if you do want to give ETB a try for a free trial, I'll go ahead and increase that standard 14-day trial out to a 30-day trial. Just type in option S in the referral section during the subscription process, and we'll upgrade that trial for you. So that's my part. Tracy, I will hand it off to you.
All right, we are going to get into some Q&A now. We do have quite a few questions to get to. We want to be mindful of everybody's time. We're getting closer to the top of the hour. So the first one I do want to hit on is somebody asked about slide 8. Basically, kind of the information on the slide did not essentially match what was being said. So I'm going to pass that over to Erin to kind of clear up what was happening on that slide.
Thank you, thank you. I am very glad actually that somebody asked that. Is there any way that you can throw that back up
Yeah,
on
let
the
me go
screen just
back.
so
Sure.
so essentially, yep, this one right here. So the pie chart here is accurate. The percentages here are definitely correct. It was my mistake in mixing those up. So it is the daily demand charges amounting to 59% of the total demand charge allocation, which, like we mentioned, is definitely a step in the right direction. But with option S being kind of marketed as the daily demand charge rate, we think that there's still some room for improvement here, and we're eager to see if that will come to life within PG&E's future general rate case.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. I will go back to this Q&A slide now. Let me toss another one your way, Erin. We had a few for you. So somebody asked, is there a minimum amount of time PG&E has said that option S is going to be available, like 5, 10 years, just to make sure financials are used to justify storage?
Thank you for the question. I don't have a firm answer offhand. Within the decisions and various advice letters that I've skimmed through, I have not seen that specifically mentioned. I do know that within the decision that approved the option S rate, the CPUC did order PG&E to perform a rate study around option S and the daily demand charge aspect. I recently reached out to our PG&E contact about this. That study has either not come to life yet or hasn't been published. It's expected to be something that PG&E includes within their next rate design case. So as of right now, I don't foresee any certain time period around this. Keep in mind, like we mentioned, there is a cap of the capacity allotment under that. So other than that, that's all we know as far as timeline that option S will be available thus far.
I think the one thing I want to add on this one, honestly, is one of the biggest kind of, I guess, not surprises, but like the 2 slides Erin showed so far to date, option S uptake has been very, very low, kind of like maybe surprisingly low. I think Erin had that slide, 12 customers currently interconnected, like literally 12 in the entire territory. I think another 10 are in the queue with reservations. So maybe in the neighborhood of like 20. You had that other slide that said there's probably about 300 customers, we think, conservatively. It actually probably doesn't even count the B10s that are eligible, that are already interconnected, already have solar and storage. If they wanted to, they can move to S, right? And then the last point, which is kind of the big conclusion I drew, which is like, I really do believe it most often would make sense to go to S. You would just save more money. So there's a pretty big disconnect there. There's a lot of customers that are eligible. Very few have done it. We're pretty confident in saying that you'd be better off doing it. So my hunch is, we'll see. It'll be interesting to watch, but I think some of that capacity will start getting soaked up. Folks obviously have to run it and get confident with it and comfortable with it. But I don't know if like a date will come into play, because it seems like 50 megawatts in each of those 3 buckets, 150 total, is not a ton. So it will be interesting to watch. And that doesn't even count like new customers that are looking at doing solar and storage today that would just kind of reserve. So that will be interesting to watch.
Cool, thank you both for answering that one. I think you kind of hit on this, Adam and Aaron, just now, but essentially why the enrollment for Option S has been so slow. I don't know if you want to expand on it or if you kind of hit it all there.
I'll start, Aaron, you can add in and Simo can add in. I think for sure on our side, we've been getting a lot of inquiries over at least going back a year since these rates launched. We did not have the ability to model this well until maybe 4 months ago as part of the V4 rollout. And as folks know, that was a staged rollout. We kind of migrated folks over the course of a couple months. So my hunch there is that there was not good tools for people to have real confidence to say, yes, I do in fact think S is better off. And then that's, even furthermore, like Matt Simo hit on a lot of the Acumen EMS functionality that we offer at Energy Toolbase now. It's not just being able to model it on a pre-sales basis. You obviously, your EMS vendor also has to, be able to dispatch and optimize to that option S rate, which it is a bit different, just shaving, on a daily basis in that 4 to 9 window. So that's my thesis. There hasn't been good software tools yet, but I think hopefully this webinar goes a long way towards letting people see some of the stuff we've seen, and then now they're going to go out and really run it for themselves. That's my hunch.
Well, thank you, Adam. Aaron, I'll toss this one to you. Is there any way that you think or the team thinks Option S can be improved, the Option S rate?
Yep, we kind of hit on this a little bit throughout the presentation, especially with those pie charts that we had up earlier. After conducting this study, we certainly have a few suggestions on how the rate can be made even more ESS friendly. Our standpoint is that the distribution cost should really be recouped more from time-related daily demand charges and less from the non-coincident monthly demand charges. Like we said, Option S is definitely a step in the right direction, but we think that further rate design and innovation is needed to really make Option S that quote storage friendly optimal rate, that just increases utility bill savings for those customers. And yeah, if Adam wants to add anything there too on that question, but I think overall we just want to see more of that shift of demand charge allocation.
Yeah, totally. I'll go a step further. I'll take a shot at PG&E here. They made so much hubbub over this innovative daily demand charge storage friendly rate. And that one slide Aaron had up, it's actually only a 60-40 split, roughly. 60% of it is $1 per kW day, daily demand charge. 40% of it is the old way of doing it, just your $1 per kW month, non-coincident charge. If you're gonna do it, my recommendation, go all the way. Like do ideally 100% of that demand charge recovery through $1 per kW day demand charge. I think that would further juice up the storage savings and make S even better compared to R. So that would be my #1 recommendation.
Great, thank you both. I know we hit on NEM3 a little bit. I'll send this one to Adam. Should we start modeling projects now with NEM3 inputs?
Give us 3 weeks. We are working around the clock. Our next big webinar that Tracy and Aaron and I and others are working on behind the scenes, we're going really deep, really extensive on our NEM3. What's it mean for commercial solar and storage projects? As folks know, there is a lot of moving pieces. It's like quicksand right now on that NEM3 proceeding, which makes it hard because everything is fluid right now in terms of what final changes are going to get adopted. We know for sure, I think Simo mentioned this, that the export rate is going to get crushed. I'm very comfortable saying that. I've been pretty close to the proceeding, working with CALSA. I'm on the subcommittee. I'm on the CALSA board, so I've been tracking this close. We're going to be putting out a really extensive webinar on what we think you should be doing or how to model it, how to set up and run those. So I think folks are probably starting to do that now. We have a really good workflow for doing it. And we're hopefully going to present a really great webinar in 3 weeks to kind of share all of our thinking. We've been following it close. That's kind of what I'd say for now, Tracy.
Cool, thank you. Aaron, I'll throw this one to you. Any timeline on SC Southern California Edison or SDG&E trying this type of program or implementing this?
Great question. Thus far, there haven't been any daily demand charge rates proposed by either of the other California IOUs. We are aware that both of them have conducted various demand-related workshops and studies to date, but as of yet, there hasn't been any formal proposal of a rate design on their part. We fully expect, though, the topic to be included within their next general rate cases, and for advocates such as CalSun SIA to continue to lobby on behalf of the solar and storage industry to see those storage-friendly daily demand charge rates come to life within California, not just those IOUs, but the rest of the utilities and, you know, countrywide too. That's what we'd like to see.
Thank you, Aaron. Matt, I'm gonna kind of throw two at you at once. Are there any energy market restrictions that Acumen can work within? And I'll throw the ETB Monitor because we talked about it. Is there any additional cost for ETB Monitor?
Thanks. Yeah, great questions. Yeah, really, as far as the markets for the controls, no. We haven't found any sort of market yet that our controls will not work with. So right now, we're working within 15 different geographic locations, spanning like, North America all the way down South America. I think some sites up in Canada, Hawaii. So we're kind of like all over the place right now. So as far as markets go, no. We should be absolutely able to accommodate those markets. As far as the Acumen, the ETB Monitor goes, that is a great question, right? You would think that there would be a cost, but at this time there is not. So when you do purchase our controls, you will get ETB Monitor for free. So in the future, working on some new exciting products to kind of complement ETB Monitor as well. But for right now, no additional cost. You purchase our controls and you get that as well.
This one more for you, Matt. We're going to wrap up soon. A couple more questions. If somebody's looking to model an Acumen project, is there somebody in specific they should get in contact with if they have something related to an option S question when modeling Acumen?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So yeah, all of our users, you have an assigned account manager. So the first person to reach out to is that account manager. So if you don't know who that is, you can always just email me. I can reply back with that person. You can always email just contact@energytoolbase.com. We'll get you in touch with your account manager. But that's the first person. And if there are very, very specific questions, site related and really digging deep, we can bring more people into the meetings. But the first person is that account manager.
Awesome, thank you, Adam. This one is for you, I think. Did you model the voluntary B19S switch from B10?
Great question. I mentioned it briefly. We did, and the best summary I can give you, and maybe looks like Chris asked that. By the way, I'm looking at the attendee list. It's kind of like a who's who of like the top developers in the PG&E territory that are on today, and it's like all the really smart CNI folks that are deep in the weeds modeling this stuff. And I'm seeing a ton of good questions, and I don't think we're going to be able to get to them all. So I'm sure Tracy will say we'll do as always, try to get back to all y'all individually to answer some of these. That's a great question on the B10 to B19S voluntary. What I said earlier, it's not as cut and dry. We saw this in the masterclass analysis where I think it was closer to 50-50, where the customer we found, depending on the load profile, was actually better off staying on B10 rather than moving to B19 option R. So we did not study it exclusively, like really in depth. And honestly, one of the reasons I chose the B19 mandatory, it's very similar to the B20 because it kind of painted more of a conclusive picture. 80% of the time, you're better off on S. That is, I think, not a true statement for the B10 to B19S switch. And I don't have data to say if it's 50-50, but I know it's not as nearly as conclusive. So another good reason why, call up Matt Simo, call up your account manager, let us put eyes on that with you. That's the best way I could summarize that one.
All right, to be mindful of everybody's time, we do have some questions that we haven't gotten to. We do want to cap it here, but we will be doing some outreach. If you did ask a question and we didn't get to it, we do want to send you an email, or you can email us, but we will get that question answered for you. We just ran out of time today. I apologize, my dog is in the background, she's crying. So, like we said, contact us. Please don't be afraid to reach out. We are going to be sending the recording of this webinar shortly after we get off, and the slide deck will be included with that. So thank you all for being on with us today, for sticking out past the hour here. Sorry about that, but we'll send all those links that we talked about to our upcoming NEM3 webinar and our blogs to you as well. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.